You have a park. You probably pass one on the way to somewhere else. Maybe you cut through it in the morning. Maybe you sat in it once and felt, briefly, that the city had given you something. It has been there your whole life. It will be there after you. It asks nothing of you, and you ask nothing of it. Here is the thing nobody asks. You can walk through it. You can run through it. You can sit in it, sleep in it, let your children play in it, but you cannot eat from it. Not one thing growing in that park was put there to feed you. The trees are there for shade. The grass is there for looking at. The whole living, breathing, rooted thing, and not one calorie intended for the person standing in it. That has always been true of every park you have ever been in, and you have never once been told why. $250. That was the exact amount of property a black man in New York State had to own before he was legally allowed to vote under the 1821 Constitution. And 10 of the exactly 100 men in New York City who had crossed that threshold lived in the settlement that was demolished to build Central Park. That is the number I kept returning to. And the more I looked at it, the more the park I had been walking through all my life began to feel different. I wasn't the only one who noticed, not even close. When I started asking people about it, not historians, just people, I kept hearing the same thing, a version of the same small hesitation. Someone would mention a park, and then pause, and say something like, "It's nice, but there's nothing to do in it," or "It's beautiful, but it feels like it's not really for us." Not anger, not accusation, just a quiet, unnamed sense that the space was designed for looking at rather than living in. And that feeling turns out to be everywhere. In every city in the global north, the park follows the same logic. It is maintained with public money. It is surrounded by neighborhoods where people struggle to afford food. And yet the possibility of growing anything edible inside it, anything that could feed a person standing in it, is not even on the table. It is not debated. It is not refused. It simply does not come up. That is not an accident of design. That is a design. And once you see it, you start asking the question that everyone has always been close to asking but never quite did. How did the park, the public space, the common ground, the thing your taxes built and maintain, become the one place in your city where feeding yourself is not allowed? Here is what we have always been told. Cities in the 1800s were in crisis. Industrial migration had packed medieval streets beyond anything they were built to handle. Cholera moved through the water supply. Typhoid followed. The air above industrial neighborhoods was black with soot. Open cesspools ran between houses. People were dying in numbers that made the authorities genuinely afraid. And the reformers who fought for public parks were not cynics. They were responding to a real emergency with the tools their science gave them. Clean air, open space, green lungs for a city that was choking. The parks were a public health intervention. And they worked. The death rates fell. The cities survived. I want to be honest about that. The sanitary explanation is not nothing. It rests on real evidence. Serious people built it from genuine research. The cholera outbreaks were real. The overcrowding was real. The crisis was real. It accounts for almost everything. Almost. In 1856, a military engineer named Egbert Ville conducted a formal topographical survey of the land designated for Central Park. His map, held today in the New York City Municipal Archives, recorded what was actually on that land before the demolition began. Not a wasteland, not a shantytown. Approximately 150 mature trees, dominated by cultivated fruit species. A community greenhouse. A structured, productive, inhabited landscape that had been feeding people for decades. The official explanation calls that landscape a pestilential spot that had to be cleared for public health. The map shows something that does not look like a wasteland. And the park you walk through, the one with no food in it, sits in that gap, in the space between what the official record claimed was there and what VLA's survey actually recorded. And then I found it somewhere else. Not a similar thing, the same thing. Boston Common is one of the oldest public spaces in the United States. It has been there since 1634. For nearly 2 centuries, working-class households in Boston used it the way it was intended, as a shared grazing common, a piece of productive land held collectively, where families who could not afford private property could keep livestock and feed themselves. It was not chaotic. It was not collapsing. In 1646, the town of Boston passed a decree capping the herd at exactly 70 cows to prevent overgrazing. The community had been self-regulating its own commons for generations. The Boston City Archaeology Department records confirm this. In 1830, the city banned livestock from Boston Common entirely. The official reason was the one you already know, the tragedy of the commons. The argument that shared land inevitably collapses because individuals will always take more than their share until there is nothing left. It is the argument that makes enclosure sound like mathematics rather than politics. It sounds neutral. It sounds inevitable. It sounds like no one's fault. But the Boston City Archaeology Department records also preserve something else. The complaints filed by wealthy Beacon Hill residents who found livestock too unrefined and visually incompatible with the luxury housing being built along the Commons' northern edge. The tragedy of the Commons, in Boston in 1830, had a postcode. 2 cities, 2 different decades, the same productive common cleared, the same official justification applied. And in both places, the space left behind looked exactly like the park you walk through, now maintained, manicured, and containing nothing you can eat. I kept looking, and the same thing kept appearing. Not approximately the same, not thematically similar, the same specific structure. A productive common, an official justification built around public health, public order, or public safety. And underneath it, in the archived record, a different story about who benefited from the clearance and who lost the ability to feed themselves. In Loughton, Essex, on the edge of Epping Forest, working-class households had the legal right to enter the forest every winter and cut branches from the trees for fuel. Not a charity. A customary right, centuries old, recognized in law. The Epping Forest Act of 1878 was presented to the public as forest preservation, protecting the ancient woodland from degradation. What the statute actually did, when you read it in the UK National Archives, was criminalise the fuel-gathering rights of working people, while simultaneously preserving the grazing rights of wealthier landowners inside the same forest. The same trees, the same land, 2 sets of rights. One set survived the act, the other did not. Across the Atlantic, in Brookline, Massachusetts, Frederick Law Olmsted, the man who designed Central Park, the man whose name is synonymous with the American public park, cleared a thriving, mature, multi-variety apple orchard from his own property in 1883. The National Park Service records at the Frederick Law Olmsted National Historic Site document this directly. He demolished a working orchard to construct an artificial pastoral lawn modelled on the English countryside. The man who built the parks was, on his own land, doing exactly what the parks did to everyone else's. Further west, in Los Angeles, Vernondale Central Park was a 10-acre public orchard of mature orange, lemon, and pepper trees, a functioning community food space, maintained and used. In 1904, the Los Angeles County land records show it was cleared. The official reason was suburban residential development. The orchard became housing lots. The PBS SoCal Lost LA series documented what was lost. Nothing edible replaced it. Different countries, different decades, different official languages and different municipal governments. The same productive landscape cleared, the same non-edible ornamental space installed in its place. This is not the shape of coincidence. Coincidence scatters. This clusters. And the park you walk through, the one in your city, the one built with public money on public land, exists in every one of those places, not metaphorically. The non-edible ornamental park exists in New York, in Boston, in Essex, in Brookline, in Los Angeles. It is the same system in every jurisdiction the record covers. The same logic, the same outcome, the same absence of anything you can eat. You were not given something local, you were given something global. Here is what the official explanation requires you to accept, not as a conspiracy, as simple arithmetic. 5 cities, 3 countries, 2 continents, New York, Boston, Lawton, Brookline, Los Angeles. All of them, inside a 60-year window between 1830 and 1904, arrived at the same specific outcome. Productive community food commons, orchards, grazing lands, fuel forests, kitchen gardens cleared, non-edible ornamental parks installed in their place. The same design logic, the same justification language, the same class of people losing access to food-producing land, the same class of people gaining aesthetically pleasing real estate on its border. 5 jurisdictions, 3 different legal systems, 2 different continents, 1 outcome, 60 years. I am not saying someone coordinated this. I want to be precise about that. I am saying that the official explanation, which is that this happened independently, city by city, driven by local sanitary reformers, responding to local conditions, requires you to believe that 5 separate municipal governments, operating in different legal languages, on different continents, with no documented coordination mechanism between them, all looked at productive community land and arrived at the same solution in the same compressed historical window. The official explanation has never been required to account for that arithmetic. It has never been asked to. The coincidence has simply been allowed to sit there, unnamed, in the gap between the local histories that never speak to each other. And the park you are standing in right now is the product of that coordination. Whatever it was. However it happened, you are holding the output of a process that occurred simultaneously across 5 jurisdictions in a 60-year window that the official explanation calls independent local decision-making. The park was there before you were born. It will be there after. It contains nothing you can eat, and you have never once been asked whether that was the park you wanted. Subscribe. Because what they built to close the account is still open, and it is not what they intended to leave behind. Thomas Willingale, Lawton, Essex. The eve of the 11th of November, 1860. He is standing outside a pub he has decided not to enter. Inside, the lord of the manor is hosting a supper. The ale is free, the food is free. Every man in the village who holds lopping rights has been invited. Willingale knows what the supper is for. The law was specific. If a single year passed without the lopping season being initiated at the stroke of midnight on November 11, the customary rights of the entire parish would be permanently forfeited to the lord of the manor. 1 missed year, 1 night. That was all it required. And the lord of the manor had calculated, correctly, that a free pub supper beginning at dusk would do what no legal proceeding had managed to do, keep the loppers inside until the deadline passed. Willingale walked to Staples Hill alone. At midnight he struck the first branch, the Willingale v. Maitland legal records and the Lawton Local History Archives both document what happened next. His son and 2 nephews were arrested. They were charged with injuring forest trees. They were sentenced to hard labor when they refused to pay the fines. Willingale spent the remaining 10 years of his life in legal proceedings he could not read, fighting for rights he could not afford to lose, supported by the newly formed Commons Preservation Society. He died in poverty in 1870. The case was not resolved before he died. He was not making a decision about history. He was making a decision about winter fuel, about whether his household would be cold. He did his job, the job his family had done for generations on that same hill, and that ordinary act, repeated at midnight on one specific November, became the legal thread that forced the passage of the Epping Forest Act 1878 and halted all future private enclosures of the forest. Thomas Willingale did not know what he was part of. The record does not show that anyone told him. That is either the most ordinary thing about this entire investigation, a man doing what his father did on the hill where his father did it, or the most important. The record cannot tell us which. I want to be honest with you about what I cannot prove. Not as a disclaimer. As the most important thing I can say. There are 3 things this investigation cannot establish. The first is what the coordination was. The 5 cities, the 3 legal systems, the 60-year window, the same outcome repeated across 2 continents. I can show you the documented instances. I cannot show you the mechanism that connected them. No archived memo, no recorded meeting, no named individual who moved between New York and Boston and Lawton and Brookline and Los Angeles carrying the same instructions. That document does not exist in this investigation. It may not exist at all. The second is whether it was deliberate or emergent. It is entirely possible that municipal reformers in 5 separate cities, reading the same sanitary literature, attending the same international hygiene conferences, absorbing the same professional consensus about urban design, independently arrived at the same solution without anyone directing them to. Emergence is real. Professional consensus spreads without coordination. I cannot rule that out. The investigation does not rule it out. The third is what the park was originally designed to do beyond its stated purpose. I can show you what it replaced. I can show you who lost access to productive land when it was installed. I cannot show you that the loss was the intention rather than the outcome. That distinction matters. The investigation cannot collapse it. What I can show you is the pattern. What I cannot show you is the intent. And I want to be clear. A pattern without documented intent is not proof of anything. It is a shape in the record that the official explanation has not been required to account for. I am also aware that I have been looking at this pattern for a long time now. Minds that look for patterns find them. I found orchards and grazing commons and fuel forests, and I connected them across 5 cities and called it a shape. I am not exempt from the possibility that I built the shape myself out of genuine but selectively gathered evidence. I am not asking you to trust my pattern recognition. I am asking you to look at the specific, documented instances, Villale's 1,856 survey, the Boston Town Records of 1,646, the Epping Forest Act of 1,878, the National Park Service records at Fairstead, the Los Angeles County land deeds, and tell me whether the official explanation accounts for all of them. It does not account for all of them. That is not my conclusion. That is the gap. There is one thing the record preserved that connects the park you walk through to everything I have shown you. Lopping Hall, Loughton, High Road, Loughton, Essex, built in 1884. It is still there. It operates today as a community centre managed by the Lopping Endowment, UK registered charity number 228236. You can walk in. Above the original entrance there is a terracotta relief panel fired clay, permanent, publicly visible, depicting 19th century labourers cutting branches from pollarded forest trees. The exact act that Thomas Willingale performed alone on Staples Hill at midnight, preserved in the fabric of the building that was built with the money paid to extinguish the right he died defending. Inside the building there is a room named after him, the Willingale Room, named for an illiterate labourer who walked to a hill alone because his household needed fuel for the winter. It did not survive because someone protected it. It survived because the system that processed everything around it, the enclosures, the clearances, the ornamental replacements, did not recognise what it was. It was compensation architecture. A legal settlement rendered in brick and terracotta. The system built it to close the account. The account did not close. The park is in your life right now. It was there before you watched this. It will be there tomorrow. It has a specific weight to it, the weight of maintained grass, of pruned non-edible trees, of a design that has never once been explained to the person standing inside it. That weight has not changed. What has changed is what you now know about where it came from, about the 60-year window in which it appeared across 5 jurisdictions simultaneously, about Thomas Willingale, who processed none of it and understood all of it, who walked to Staples Hill at midnight in November 1860 because the alternative was a cold house. About the 150 mature fruit trees that Egbert Villale mapped in 1856 and that were gone by 1858, replaced by the most famous park in the world. The park was not created for you, it was created about you. It was installed into the landscape by a process that had a specific designation for what you were: a body that needed managing, a common that needed enclosing, a right that needed extinguishing, and no designation for what you knew or what you might eventually ask. Lopping Hall remains. The terracotta panel remains. The Willingale Room remains. And if you stand in front of that panel long enough, it tells you exactly how something becomes ordinary. Not through familiarity, through the completely ordinary act of no one ever explaining why it was necessary in the first place. The park has been in your life since before you could read. You have never been asked whether you wanted it. You have never been told what it replaced. What would you do differently if you had been?